Hey, Lefty Notre Dame. We have none other than the Mark Edwards, the legend, with us to answer your questions about this historic Notre Dame football season. Thanks Mark, for joining us.
Hey,
let's get right to it.
Always good talking Notre Dame football.
Thank you. Okay. Steve Klein asks, realistically, what chance does Notre Dame have to win their game against probably Clemson in the first round of the playoffs, and then a national championship game if they make it?
Well, I'm optimist, and I love Notre Dame. So obviously, can we beat Clemson? Obviously, I think we match up pretty well against them. Defensive line versus defensive line. You're probably the two best in the country. The way Book has been playing, throwing the ball over the field, but we saw last week a couple chinks in the armor. They got some pressure on Book, and it slowed us down a little bit, so that's a little bit worrisome. But we got plenty of time to get all those errors corrected. But can we win? Yes. Do I think we're going to win? Yes, I do. Alabama, that's a little different story. You're going to have a special night to beat that team. I believe we can do it. Big underdogs lose or big underdogs win, all the time. I wouldn't have a Super Bowl ring if it wasn't for a big underdog beating a seemingly unbeatable team. So, my heart says yes. My head sometimes says no, though.
All right, thanks.
Interesting. Okay, so Mark, elephant in the room this season is conference talk. Bob Kelly asks, he says, Mark, I live in Georgia. Many in big SEC country are saying we shouldn't be in the playoffs because we have no championship game. Should the Irish join a conference? If so, ACC, Big Ten, what do you think?
Well, I'll go the easy answer. If we do join a conference, it would be the ACC. I've asked the AD this in past years. When the Big 12 didn't expand, a few years ago, the logical thought was that the Big 12 is eventually going to fold, thus making 4 super conferences. If that happens, that would probably force Notre Dame into a conference. But, then I asked, well, if we go into a conference, is it going to be geographical with the Big Ten or, ACC with our current affiliation? And he said undoubtedly it would be the ACC. Now, the way things are right now, no, we don't need a conference. We do have a little less margin for error, but you also see one-loss conference champions sometimes not getting into the playoff. So with the independence that we have, we're able to schedule nationally. We're able to schedule great teams, and still keep our traditional rivalries. So I think 99% of Notre Dame people are going to keep that the same way it is, but eventually we may be forced by the college football playoff committee or however that stacks out to join a conference. I'm a traditionalist. I don't want that, but I also didn't want field turf, and I also didn't want the big screen in the stadium, but that's the evolution of football.
Sure.
Okay. Following that train of thought, Frank asks, Notre Dame is more of a school, more than a school. It's a brand. Would joining the ACC hinder the brand in any way?
I don't think so. I think Notre Dame very well may get some concessions if they were forced to join a conference, like possibly keeping that NBC contract. Just like, they got concessions by joining in nearly every other sport other than hockey, but, you still got the football independence. So because Notre Dame is that brand they are, I think that the ACC will work with them, and, Notre Dame will still be able to keep some of their traditional rivalries and still play that AC schedule if they're forced to do so.
Right.
Do you think we'd keep the contract with NBC?
I think so. We've had it since 1992 or 91, something like that. 90. It's been. I know Notre Dame relishes that contract, relishes that partnership, just like they do the Under Armour contract now. Great partners. Unless we're forced to give that up somehow or another, which Notre Dame has an awful lot of power. We got our own seat, at that AD table, with conference commissioners and everything else. Jack Swarbuck's sitting right with those guys. So Notre Dame brand still carries a great deal of influence.
Mm-hmm. A lot of weight. Okay, cool. Thanks, Mark. So Bill McCammon would like to discuss recruiting. We've all heard that Notre Dame can't get the big time talent. Do you agree? And do you think that we are in an upswing when it comes to recruiting?
Definitely in an upswing. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been in the position we've been in the past 2 seasons. But with that said, Notre Dame can get anybody. It's not like it was in the 80s where you just eliminate 45, 50% of the recruits right from the get-go. Notre Dame has a little more leeway now than they have in the past, but they still can't recruit every kid. They know that certain kids are not going to be successful at Notre Dame. You may have somebody who may be borderline academically, but if they're a good kid, the coaches and the recruiters get to know that kid and that family, and they're going to know if that kid can succeed at Notre Dame or not. So the recruiting base is a little broader than it was kind of right after the Holtz timeline, but it's still not as broad as an Ohio State or a Florida State or somewhere like that. Because we still got to get the right character kids in. So that just still eliminates a lot of talent out there, but the recruiting base is bigger. And if Notre Dame thinks the kid is going to be successful, then they'll bring him in, even if he is a little bit borderline.
Let me ask you a question, Mark. John and I were talking about this last night. What do you think of these kind of stars that are associated with recruits? 4-star, 5-star, 3-star. Notre Dame has only landed 2 5-star recruits in the last 6 years. Do you think that's do these stars really matter? Is it more about heart and kind of dedication than it is these,
well, it certainly doesn't hurt. The more 5 stars that you get, the more they're likely going to pan out, but it's not the end all tell all. Lots of kids develop later. But you see the Alabama typically getting more 5 stars than anybody else, and more of those are panning out. So, there is a little rhyme behind the reason, but it's not all encompassing.
Max Redfield, for instance.
Max Redfield was a 5-star recruit.
Well, and McGlinchey and Nelson were 3 stars. So,
right.
Something like a Drew Tranquil, come on. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mark, do you and other former players get involved on social media platforms to aid recruiting, or, if so, who are the heaviest hitters? And is it legal?
Yeah. We get involved a tiny bit, not a whole lot. More along the lines, if we're on campus and they have recruits there, I've walked through the facility and they've been hosting a recruit, and I just shake his hand and say hello. But as far as social media, it looks like most of the kids nowadays are on Twitter. So former players will go on there and give a like or a shout out or go Irish or something like that. But more often than not, there's not a whole lot as former players you can do. There's so many rules and regulations that you don't want to jeopardize any possibility of a good recruit getting on to Notre Dame. So you try not to do too much, but at the same time let them know that they're going to be adored and revered for coming to Notre Dame.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Mark, Oscar Tapia, he wants to know how you personally would scheme against a team like Alabama.
Well, Alabama's proved over the long haul that their bigs are better than most other bigs on both sides of the ball. So you can't just, be a 1990s Notre Dame football team and run it down their throat like we used to be able to do to anybody. They're the Notre Dame, under Holtz, basically, where they got bigger, faster, more physical athletes up front than most other teams, if not all other teams. Nobody matches up physically with them. So, the only teams that have had success versus Alabama are the ones that can open it up, spread them out. And this goes against everything as a fullback, I stood for, but you have to throw the ball around to beat Alabama. You got to be able to throw, and you got to be able to run after the catch. A lot of times somebody will throw the ball, 50 times in a game, but 20 of those throws are at the line of scrimmage or within 3 or 4 yards. I used to call those long handoffs, because really all that is a controlled running game. Very safe, high percentage passes. It's almost called, like I said, we just call them long handoffs. And, you got to beat Alabama that way, because you're not going to beat them running right at them. And, you saw what, when Clemson beat them in the national title game a couple of years ago, you saw what Deshaun Watson was doing. Johnny Manziel back in the day, running around and spreading them out and doing a lot of different things like that. So right now, Alabama is physically better than everybody else. And, you're going to have to do something schematically to beat them. And on top of that, you're going to have to get some turnovers, and you cannot make any mistakes.
Awesome. Okay, Jennifer talks Alabama and their dynasty. They're 12-0 again, and all the national championships they've won in the past few years. And the Irish are 12-0. She wants to know what does it take to make Notre Dame the dynasty that Alabama is? Won one championship.
I think right now there are 3 programs that are head and shoulders above everybody else. That would be Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. They have been to the playoffs multiple times, and you can almost throw Oklahoma in there. They've been to the playoffs a few times as well, but they haven't won a title for, 10 years or whenever the last time it was. But I think those 3 programs have differentiated themselves from everybody else with multiple playoff berths, and they've all won a national title, within the last, Ohio State, I think, was 2014. So Notre Dame is in probably that second tier of teams right now, where we would need to make multiple playoff appearances and win a title to get right up there with those 3 programs. But even in those 3 programs, Alabama has separated themselves from the other 2. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Right.
Interesting. Mark, you played in the 93 season, obviously. Edison wants to know, how difficult is it to keep up your intensity each and every week, especially when you're going for an undefeated season?
You know what? It's pretty hard to find new and motivational things, different motivational things, week in and week out. But, the one thing Holtz always, used to say was, you can't win a national championship this week. And, who was it? It was Tillery referred to it the other week. All we can do is win this week. The big thing Holtz always said was, we don't have to be the best team in the country today. We just got to be the best team in the stadium. And,
right.
You don't win a national championship any given week. You win it each and every week. And then one game you actually wake up and you are. So picking up the intensity, each and every week, finding a different way to pick up the intensity each and every week, finding a different motivational ploy is always big. But at the end of the day, it comes back to the leadership of the players. The coach can yell and scream and scheme and develop different drills you can do and everything else, but it comes back to the leadership of the players. And, we got good senior leadership. They know what's out there in front of them, and, staying focused, staying intense every single week is definitely a challenge.
I'll bet. Okay, Charlie Mullins, is talking about travel. How hard, in your experience, is it to travel at Notre Dame?
Well, Notre Dame does it right. They travel first class, which certainly helps out. But it does wear on you, the different time zones, lack of sleep. These guys now play a lot more night games than we did. We would always get home in time on a Saturday from most away games to, go out and cause a little trouble afterwards. So, these poor kids are getting back. I got a text from Ron. They got back like at 6:30 in the morning from USC. So, that does wear and tear on you. But the good part is they made it through. And had plenty of time to rest, plenty of time to get healthy, plenty of time to rejuvenate everything. But it does wear on you physically and mentally as much as anything, especially playing all those night games. But we ran the gauntlet doing that, and these kids traveled more in November than I ever did in at any level that I played. So I mean, that's a real testament to their strength and conditioning and their nutrition. I mean that's a huge part of it as well, which we had none of that back in the 90s.
Do they travel commercial flights or?
Well, they travel typically on commercial airlines, but it's a private charter, so it's just okay. Notre Dame people on that particular flight, and typically there's media and fans and coaches and special guests sitting up front, and then you have the team back there by themselves, so nobody's really bothering them.
Thank you.
And don't you kind of think it just goes with the territory, since we are independent, that we have to travel? It is what it is.
Well, certainly, that's what goes along with the prestige. This is what goes along with being a national university. And that's why we get kids from California and Texas and, state of Washington and Florida and everywhere else, because we do travel, we do play everywhere. Any kid from any part of the country, his family is going to get to watch a game somewhere near them at some point in that kid's career, no matter where they're from. So that's a big help as far as our national recruiting platform.
Totally. Okay, Mark, I want to know personally, what is it like to play in an incredibly hostile environment?
What? It's a lot of fun. Typically before the game, you're getting called quite a few choice words as you're out there warming up. Especially, I grew up in Ohio and I left Ohio for Notre Dame. So when we played at Ohio State in '95, it was I got called a lot of choice things. But it's also fun, because you're out there. Specifically as an offensive player, that's when they're getting loud, when they're trying to make the snap count difficult, communication difficult as an offensive player, and you don't hear individuals once the game starts. You just hear white noise, right? And there's nothing better than having a big play and quieting the crowd down. As a visiting player, that is just one of the most surreal moments, most unbelievable moments. And then at the end of the game, when you're getting in victory formation and half the crowd's leaving and everything else, that's awesome. But it is difficult to deal with that stuff, especially early in the game. And if you let the other team start getting some momentum, start getting some plays, it gets more and more difficult as the game goes on. And there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like in a situation like Miami, they were down from the very beginning, and to have to continue going out there in that crazy environment. I mean, I was terrified, so I can't imagine how they were.
Yeah, well, it does get difficult if you let it snowball. But quieting down a hostile crowd there's nothing better than that. Like in '96, we played at Texas, and big game, and it was one of the most difficult environments I've ever played in, and it was out of hand early, and we beat them right at the end, and you could hear a pin drop in that stadium, except for that one little section of Notre Dame fans that was up there, and that was that was really cool to see that support.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's nothing better than beating the team on the road. I'll tell you, that's what I told Megan, and she experienced it.
It was fabulous last week. It truly was.
So seeing the opposite color jersey in their home stadium, sulking out of there early is a thing of beauty.
It really was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever witnessed. Truly.
My favorite one was in Knoxville against Tennessee, 1991.
Mhm.
The Rocket scored that touchdown, and it was history. Anyway, all right, Mark. My question is, what's the routine at halftime? Is it different when you're down? If you're up, is it different in the NFL? Is it compared to?
No, it's pretty uniform. Both college pros, whether you're up or down. Typically, no games decided at halftime. There've been big, even if you're up 28-0, you still go out there in the third quarter, try to put the game away, put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. So during the week, there's a lot of yelling and screaming. Game day, there's typically not. All right. So you go in the locker room, you get 2 or 3 minutes to go to the bathroom, do whatever you got to do, get settled down. Then you get together as an offense or defense, talk about what's working, what's not, what changes got to be made. It's all business-like. And on offense, we typically would, usually when you start the game, the night before, you get your first 10, first 15 scripted plays, kind of so you can get a mindset of how you're going to open the game based on situations. And you kind of do the same thing at halftime as well, where you go in, you see what's working. The coaches have already had their meetings, gotten together, and they're like, all right, these are the plays we're going to come out with. So you can just kind of get mentally ready for that. So typically it's all business at halftime, not a lot of yelling and screaming, whether you're winning, whether you're losing, all business. Let's get another score on the board. Let's put our foot on their throat. Or, hey, let's get back into this game. But either way, it's very similar process.
Interesting.
Cool.
Okay, Mark, last question. I want your prediction. Okay, is it going to be Miami or is it going to be Arlington?
Nobody can tell that right now. Okay.
No, I know. But what's your prediction?
Well, it all depends on who wins, because the formula for this, it's not 1 versus 4 in Dallas or 2 versus 3 in Miami. I've been told that, they schedule these based upon who's playing, and with an idea of not putting either team at a big disadvantage, but maybe the 1 and 2 seed at a little bit better of an advantage. For example, if Oklahoma ends up number 4, they're not going to put Alabama versus Oklahoma in Dallas, because Oklahoma's so close and they're going to have a bigger fan base right there. So they would send them to Miami and put us in Dallas along against Clemson, assuming those lines hold out. Whereas if Ohio State creeps in there, then Alabama's probably a little closer, but would be a little more friendly for them in Dallas. So they would end up going there, and we would be over there. I think Ohio State is going to get in over Oklahoma if they both win, and Ohio State kind of seems to have a little bit of momentum going right now. And if that was the case, I would predict Miami.
Good.
All right.
Yeah. So let's
brought a smile to our face.
Let's go and take care of our business. Doesn't matter where we're playing.
I just wanted to be in South Beach. I mean, it's purely selfish.
Dallas and Arlington is not a bad place this time of year either.
Yeah.
Although you can get some cold there. Witness the 92 season with the Cotton Bowl against A&M. That was like in ice almost.
Oh.
Not fun. All right, Mark, appreciate it.
All right.
Let's do this again to see how this works. And thank you so much.
Yeah, go Irish.
Thank
Go
you.
Irish.